I would strongly encourage you to optimize what you have. So I really believe in leveraging your vendor partnerships. How are they thinking? What are they bringing? And, there's no need to go build something when it's going to be delivered. And maybe you have to wait a little bit longer, but it will be coming. So avoid the rework, optimize, and leverage your great vendor partners because they're all working on, really strong roadmaps probably and listening to all these things like you and I are talking about with AI and generative AI and how do we bake that in. But typically yes, I think you have to consider how you want to approach, and it depends on the process or the initiative, of course. But and I'm a big proponent of continuous improvement. Like we're never finished, with the work, right? We're always working on something. And part of that is trying to standardize where we can so that we brought together HR operations and talent acquisition and IT, and we all worked on this together to reduce the number of fields to be completed from 48 fields down to 14, and then 7 screens, it's on one screen, and you complete one screen and submit. Um,
How important are managers for a superior employee experience? How critical is it to have the latest technology versus knowing how to utilize what you have? And why is it important as an employee experience practitioner to forget about HR? In another episode of our season in the Workbook of an HR leader, I had the pleasure to talk to one of my peers, Nicole Sloane, about the things and much more. In the From the Workbook of an HR Leader season of our EX Labs podcast, I'm talking to experienced colleagues in our field about their daily working routine and what and how they are going about the various challenges they have to face each day. I'm a tireless believer that we can all be better if we learn from each other. But there are not many opportunities to actually do that. Yes, there are the conferences, but how often can you attend one in a year? Yes, there are the peer to peer connections, but how many do you manage to keep running? I'm a firm believer that we can all do a better job. We learn from each other, and so I have invited seasoned HR experts from various fields and companies to tell us about their workday and how they go about the challenges. Today, Nicole and I go deep on how to best understand your employees, how important a cross-functional approach is when it comes to experience, and why complexity is in every aspect the wrong way to go. And not to forget how to measure if you are successful or not. Further, we talk about how the HR function continues to stay relevant and how it might look like in 3 to 5 years from now. But before I share even more about what Nicole and I have talked about, listen for yourself. From Nicole's Workbook of an HR Leader. Hello, Nicole. It's so great to have you today. It has been a while that we've been talking, and I'm so excited to have you today in my podcast to talk about a bit, HR and from the workday of an HR leader. But before we go there, Nicole, hello.
Hello. I'm so happy to be here. I know we've been talking for a while, as you said, so this is great. I'm excited to be here.
I'm also very excited. But before we go into the weeds, Nicole, tell us a bit about yourself. Who are you? What is your background?
Well, an interesting thing about me is that I have an accounting degree. Um, like some other HR people, we didn't start in HR, but I started, with accounting roles and then have a non-traditional career path. I have had several roles within HR, moving around in different um, COEs, different leadership roles, and so I've have kind of a not the full employee life cycle, but I've had experience in different parts with payroll and local mobility and corporate compensation, HR operations, HR technology, and employee experience. So just a lot of different stepping stones to get me where I am today, and it's been really interesting and an exciting career journey.
Yeah, it sounds very interesting. And you know what? I kind of started in accounting as well. If you want to count that, one of my first project when I was with Accenture was supporting an accounting outsourcing deal, and they did not have enough people in the actual outsourcing location that they pushed in any kind of new joiner consultants they had, and I was one of these. So
Well, you that may be new information for your listeners. Maybe you've never shared that. I don't
I
know.
never did. I never did. But that's also where I met my wife, so it was a good thing. Let's go back to HR. So, Nicole, y- in a role of global head of employee experience, this is this is the core basically of what I love to talk about employee experience. But for everyone, that role is a bit different described, or a bit different nuanced. How would you describe your take on the global head of employee experience in the elevator speech?
Well, based on my experience and my view of it, it's really where you would direct and even evangelize enterprise employee experience strategy
Mm.
and the governance of that, and leverage the employee centric design principles and partner across functions to deliver what we're all striving for, the seamless experience across tools, across processes, across services.
Amazing. And how did you live this? Was this a role that was centered around more of the HR world, or was it the encompassing employee experience, even when it comes to like neighboring topics that impacted the experience of an employee?
Definitely, it encompassed HR first and foremost, but the the challenging part and the exciting part is when you partner cross-functionally. So,
Yes.
I've I've partnered with IT, that's a natural fit, right? HR and IT
Yeah.
working together, corporate communications, and, other areas like maybe global business services or, other employee-facing processes. So, it's vast, but if you do it well and you think together and kind of work together, then that's
Mm.
where you see some real impact.
I couldn't agree more, right? Because the employee really doesn't care what function is behind the experience. They see it end to end, they see it all encompassing, and either it works or it doesn't work. Talking about
Absolutely.
that doesn't work. What were some of the challenges that you faced, the challenges that you identified in that role?
Some of the challenges, well, I just mentioned, it's vast, right? It's so big and so overwhelming that
Yes.
some people just don't even know how to start. Um, and hopefully companies are thinking about it and they have started, but
Mm.
sometimes you have to start small, and kind of, build on that. The other thing is, or another challenge, I guess, would be that the vision and initiatives must align
Mhm.
with the business priority
Yeah.
in order to have the sponsorship and the resourcing. So if you're not aligning that with the business priority and you're out of alignment, you're really going to struggle and have challenges. And then maybe the other thing is just I also mentioned about cross-functional alignment
Mhm.
and
Mhm.
governance to really be successful and sustainable. It really should be, the different functions working together behind the scenes, making it look very easy on the front,
Yes.
at the employee side, but,
Yes.
working that complexity in the back.
Exactly. How did you go about this, Nicole? When I talk to peers of ours, the difficulty is that still very often the different functions are in a more siloed environment. So how was this for you, and were you able to reach across and align on what you wanted to deliver and how you deliver this as an experience?
Well, I'll speak from my experience, but also from talking to others in
Yeah.
the industry. Um, so it is challenging to reach across, and
Mhm.
sometimes, the processes in place for, things like budgeting, are not very conducive to going across functions, right? So that comes up, frequently. So I think, companies that are doing this well, at least have started with, the primary or maybe the easier functions to partner. So like I said, HR and IT together. And then IT really is complex in and of itself.
Yeah.
So there's IT that supports HR, so your HR processes and your HR IT, work together. But then you have to start pulling in other teams, the ones that are, working on automation in other areas, or you know, um, the ones that are more kind of the
Yeah.
workplace support,
Yeah.
IT support, and,
Yeah.
all of your things that are on your laptop in front of your face, that's your
Yes.
window into the world of
It
at
is. Yeah.
company. You speak to everyone through this little window when you're not, more of a frontline worker,
It
and you're sitting at a desk. So, all of those teams have to work together, and it does take work. It's like any relationship. Relationships take work, and you have to build trust.
Mhm.
And, the teams that do it real or the companies that do it really well have kind of forged that partnership across
Yeah.
and been able to set up mechanisms that will help, continue
Mhm.
the alignment. So, like a governance,
Yeah.
team or a council or something that will keep them aligned.
Yeah. Although I have to say, Nicole, I haven't seen too many of these. There are not many companies that have a cross-functional experience governance board, from what I have seen. But from my experience, what I have seen, it's two things. Number one, what you already described, right? It is the human interaction. If you can work well on a human connection with your partner in IT or in workplace, then you find a way and it will work. And the other way that I've seen is GBS. When you're a GBS organization and you all report into one boss, the topic of budgeting becomes so much easier because in the end it all gets together. This is where I've seen it really, really working the best.
Yeah, I agree. I brought up the budgeting one, and I don't wanna stay on that, but,
It's a
the
key
way you
one.
yeah, I mean, the way you plan for your year, your strategic planning and three-year planning and, those types of things, then when you are able to align on what that is, what the vision is, and what initiatives are gonna support that, then, it comes down to, who pays for it? Do we have budget to do those things? Will we have sponsorship? And, uh, just the execution of that, you might end up competing for resources. And typically you have to make adjustments anyway, right?
Yeah.
Things come
Yeah.
up that are not planned. You have to readjust, you
Yes.
reprioritize. But, have again, like you said, having that alignment with your partners really helps you make those adjustments more quickly.
Exactly. Exactly. Yeah. When was the last time a plan really worked the way you planned it out, right? And nothing came in the way. Um, I don't know. There's no worries. There's one other thing, Nicole, that you just mentioned shortly, but where I would like to go a bit more detailed. You said the window into the experience. Yes, for our desk-based workers, this is often the computer, but that's not all, right? We also have deskless workers. How do you how do you think about the persona approach in the experience world? Are you treating this different? Are you making persona-based experience designs, or how are you thinking about that?
That's a good question. And, I think different companies go about this differently.
Mm.
They find ways that work for them or maybe found out what didn't work for them. But typically, yes, I think you have to consider how you want to approach, and it depends on the process or the initiative, of course.
Yeah,
But,
yeah,
and I'm a continuous improvement, you know, big proponent of continuous improvement. Like we're never finished, with
no,
the work, right? We're always
yes,
working on something. And part of that is trying to standardize where we can. So certainly you want to standardize where you can, but then those
yeah,
personas come in and differentiate, and you have to personalize in some way. So the ways we've looked at things is just what you said, the people at a desk or deskless.
yeah,
That's a big divider, and you do have to consider that because from a technology standpoint, it's huge. You have to consider that, and what this will feel like and how it should work, um, with those personas. But then, you have the different work styles where you have people on site, you have people, hybrid, you have people fully remote, and there's that consideration in your process. You have other things that really cultural and language differences. Language is really a
mm,
big one, right? And technology
yes,
can help us solve that one. But, then as you're considering, and I'm mentioning technology here, but, the tech enablement can be different across your employee base.
yeah,
So you're not always on a level playing field when you're in different countries,
yeah,
different locations, and not everyone has a smart mobile device, to work from or able to do it or even want to do it. So
yes,
there's all these many considerations as you're working through, what's the right process and what's the right consideration. But I probably gave you too many, but those, personas, you want to start with the big personas, and
yeah.
then you have other considerations layered in.
Mm. Yeah, absolutely. And this is, would be interesting to hear from you how you have experienced that or heard it from your peers. When I speak to peers, it's very interesting. What I hear is, the countries in like Latin America or Asia Pac, they are way more digital also in the deskless workforce than, for example, the ones in Europe. And one of the interesting things is that they are so used to touch screens that they don't even know what a mouse and keyboard is and how they work.
Well, that's interesting. Yeah, I haven't heard that specific feedback, but you know, I even found I think even thinking about a whole region like Latin
Mm.
America is almost too big,
Yeah, yeah,
depending, and so what I've seen is that even a specific location could have a different,
yeah,
um, cultural dynamic
yeah.
or even, ability enablement. So, it's really interesting once you do plug employees into a technology and let them go, and then look at the data and see what's happening because
Mm.
we've seen, one location really latch on to a technology and they're high users of it. And
Yeah,
you're like,
yeah,
what is driving that? Why are they,
yeah.
really, um, you know, big big users, big proponents of that, and why are these others not? And um, so it's very fascinating when you get into the employee behaviors and seeing what's happening. But in general, yeah, you're right. I think there are you know kind of general assumptions you have with the population, and you're going to see those differences in the different geographic areas or
Yeah,
locations, or
yeah,
even just like we said, the persona.
yeah, absolutely. And Nicole, one of the reasons why I'm starting those podcasts to talk to peers is about best practice sharing and insight sharing. There's one thing, and I would love to get your view on that. That I learned the hard way in my past, which is never assume that you know what someone's needs or wants are, but go directly to the source and just ask. Otherwise, you designed your experience in a fantastic way, but fully away from the actual needs or wants of your workforce. Have you made similar experience, or how do you make sure that whatever you design fits to your audience?
I think that's a great observation. Um, I think you have to embed who you're designing for into the
Mm,
various stages. So just like you said in the beginning, engage with some of the people who this, process or this, technology or platform is for,
yeah,
and, kind of have that listening session of what's working today, what's not working today, what is it that you would be looking for, and kind of having that open conversation to gather some of the insights that you need on the front end of the design.
yeah,
And then, if you have the option, I think it's fantastic if you can have a group who will stay engaged with you throughout
yeah,
and you
yeah,
can keep coming back to them. So as you design, you can check in, not to take a lot of their time, but to check in with them at checkpoints,
A/B
and involve
testing.
them
Yeah,
in testing. When you're
yeah,
ready to go, with something and have some testers, you can bring those people in
yeah,
and they're familiar and you started that conversation. You could say, "Okay, here's where we are. Now we would like your feedback," and measure some of the
yeah,
feedback, and make some adjustments before you go to a broader group. So I love engaging them throughout the process and keeping them engaged, and even if you're lucky to keep them on as change agents,
yes,
when you go live too,
yes.
because they can be, kind of those change champions when you go live as well.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. But it's difficult. Do you have some best practices on how to keep them engaged or how to entice them to stay on this journey?
Um, you know, uh, Typically what I've done is take nominations.
Mhm,
So
mhm.
you hope that, those that are closer to these people being nominated know that they will stay engaged.
Yeah, yeah.
And they could be people who are huge supporters and, "Hey, let me
Mhm.
in and let me be part of this process," or they could be, um, I wanna say this in a nice way, difficult customers, right? People who, will be quick to give you the negative feedback, but you bring them in so that
I
you
want
can win
that.
them
Yeah.
over with, making them part of the process. So,
Yeah, yeah,
it could be either of those kinds of things, but again, thinking about your personas, making sure you're covering those with the types of people you're bringing in.
yeah,
Uh, but what I've found is they're very happy if you set out the expectations on the front.
yeah.
They are happy to stay engaged as long as you've set the expectation at the
That's
beginning.
right. Mhm. No, fantastic. That's a good one for all of us to take away. Nicole, I want to pivot a bit. The two core elements, that I'm writing and talking about most are employee experience and HR technology. And would love to get your view on both of those. We've already spoken about employee experience and your interpretation of experience. Anything to add talking about more general employee experience, or should we dive a bit into HR technology?
Maybe just a couple of things. So,
Mhm.
one is just that blend of humans and technology,
Mhm.
and each company have to learn to balance that, but balance it in a unique way that
Mhm.
kind of matches with their culture.
Yeah, yeah,
So that's really interesting when you see different companies and how they're doing that.
yeah,
It is a balance. And the other thing is, I don't think we've talked too much about the role of managers in employee
mm,
experience, but more and more we're seeing where, there's a focus turning toward managers because they have
yeah,
such a large influence over employee experience. And we're seeing talent teams continue to try to work on manager capability
Yeah, yeah,
and to help support managers.
yeah.
So I think that's a huge consideration. I saw, so just a quick reference to something I read recently, what Gallup, if you've heard of Gallup
Of
polls
course,
and
yes.
Gallup organization, they released an updated State of the Global Workplace report,
Mhm, mhm.
and they've been doing it for like 25 years. So it's a huge analysis they've done for a long period of time. And one of the key findings that just kind of supports the point I'm making, one of the key findings, in addition to confirming that higher engagement is linked to better performance outcomes, is that
Yeah.
employee experience can vary significantly across teams. And the
Mhm.
key is having consistently good managers to inspire strong performance. So I only make that point just to say, hey, that's a huge consideration and one of the personas you definitely want to bring along
Very
as you
interesting.
look at your employee experience.
That's very interesting, right? We know the manager and the manager's importance when it comes to engagement. And I think we all know that saying you join a company but you leave a manager. Um, but that also managers are very important of your perception of experience is very interesting. That's really new. Um, that's fantastic. If you don't mind, share the link with me and I'll put it into the show notes to the study. That's really interesting. Thank you. The the other interesting thing that you just mentioned, right, about the culture and how it fits to the experience. I was recently invited to the Deloitte Human Experience Advisory Board. It's an advisory board for customer and employee experience leads. That was very interesting. It was the first time that they've done it in the Silicon Valley. So by nature, the majority of companies there were more tech oriented. And for me, so far, not really working too much in really tech oriented companies, but more consumer goods. It was very interesting to understand the different experiences and needs of their workforce versus ours, right? Like one of the examples that was very interesting for me is, you know, for the majority, what my experience is, employees want something to work, want to know how it works, and then keep it stable. Don't change it too much that I don't have to get used to a different, like, way of how I don't know, request leave or whatever, right? Make it the same and then it works. Versus what I heard there from my peers in the more technology focused companies, they want always the newest. Try something different. Try something better. If it looks different, it doesn't matter. And that just, for me, really brought this to life how the culture and workforce of a company can change the way how you need to think about employee experience.
Right. No, I agree with you. And I've seen some tech companies that are, you know, if you look at a spectrum, they would be like way on the side of more technology and less
Yeah.
humans,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Uh, and it's like, where are the humans?
Yes.
And then other companies are like on the other end of the spectrum. So
Mm-hmm.
it depends on the industry you're in and, really what your leadership, is looking for. But, I agree with you. Some Sometimes employees want things to stay the same and don't want
Hmm.
to see a lot of change, but I do think if you make the change easy,
Yeah.
so like mentioned about like a leave of absence or, a
Yeah.
leave process or something like that, they're not gonna necessarily use that every day or every week.
Yeah.
But when they come to find it or they want to enact that or, initiate something,
Hmm.
make it easy to find and just
Yes.
it it can be different, but make it intuitive. So I think,
Mm.
a lot of times we're seeing updates on, mobile devices and different things just pop in and, we didn't have to attend a training, and
That's
thank
true.
goodness,
Yeah.
right? Because
Uh-huh.
we would
That's
be
true.
training all the time. So the
Yes.
more you can avoid the training and make something intuitive, I think,
Yeah.
yes, bring the change and let's make it better, but make it very intuitive.
Couldn't agree more. And let's use this as a segue to jump into technology. Let's look at HR technology. And I believe currently this is one of the coolest topics in town when it comes to experience, especially when you think about Gen AI. But that's me. How do you think about HR technology when it comes to employee experience today?
I think it's foundational. So we have to have the technology. Anyone who's not using technology, um, at this stage, I would struggle to find a company or name a company that's not, but if they aren't using it in HR, that would be very rare,
Mm.
and I think they would be left behind, by competitors. But I think it's just so closely related, and it's one of those foundational pieces. So, almost in my mind is a picture, and you've got the foundation with the technology that underpins and enables
Yeah,
employee experience,
yeah.
along with the people and the processes and the information, and it's really that foundational piece.
Yeah, I think you're right. They're really intertwined, and one cannot work with the other really to form this experience. But at the same time, Nicole, I have to admit, um, every now and then I'm speaking with companies that are still living in the pre-cloud age with systems that are, far away from self-service, not even talking about experience. So there are still some that have to catch up. I think it also depends a bit of the industry and what competition you have and what workforce you are recruiting for. But yeah, they are still out there. But staying with that, and technology, do you have some best practices you can share when it comes to experience and technology? How do you go about it? Um, uh, how do you see experience systems? How do you search or decide for one? And how do you go about implementation? What are some learnings and best practices you can share?
Well, it's interesting because when you think about HR and technology, it's almost like 2 different languages. So, my role, and I know your role, you've probably sat there and been the interpreter, because you need someone who understands both sides and can really, understand the requirements in all of the HR way of speaking, and then
Mm,
translate that over into
mm.
what do we need on the what are we trying to solve on the
Yes,
technology.
yes,
Um, but I guess if I had to boil it down to some best practices, there really should be some overarching vision and a set of guiding principles that,
yeah,
the team can leverage and just recycle, reuse every time and say,
yeah.
are we holding true to our guiding principles and we're still delivering on the which makes it really easy then, for the
Mm,
team to say, "Oh, wait, no, we didn't consider that or we're not delivering that." Um,
yeah,
and, again, just that cross-functional alignment, like I was just mentioning between HR and IT and having someone who can interpret both sides, to make sure that there really is alignment. Um,
and one tree translates into the other.
exactly. Yes. Um, and I think ideally we're having the conversations, and I'm talking like broader picture here, like
Yeah,
strategic,
yeah,
but you have the HR and employee facing technology owners really thinking broader than
yeah,
themselves,
yeah.
and understanding and having those conversations so that ideally you're road mapping together
Mhm.
and finding how are these, coming out together. Because a lot of times what I'm thinking is, what's happening when you go to deploy and how many other things are happening and how
Mhm,
many changes are being announced to employees and communications
mhm.
going, and it just gets lost, if they're just hearing too much change, they're not going to absorb it anyway. So, the more you can condense changes and even your communication,
Yeah,
it's lovely when they come together and you
Yes.
don't care which team it came from, so you don't have to have multiple communications. You can just communicate things together. Um, but I guess another ideal state is just to hide the complexity from
Mhm.
employee, and make it appear simple and seamless,
Yeah.
even if it's a lot of work on the back side. And maybe that's one of your guiding principles, right? To make it seem
Yeah.
simple and intuitive. But, really working to mask some of that. And I think sometimes in HR, we forget that employees don't just live in HR and understand our
No, they
processes,
don't. Yes.
every day. Um, So really having a voice in the room that represents them. And I think more like an employee than an HR person, just because I go first to what does this feel like? And would I be able to, find it or pick it up and do it
Yeah.
without someone guiding me through it, and getting frustrated and have to call someone. So, that masking of the complexity. Um, and then I guess just the other piece to this would be hopefully, I know you said some companies have work to do to kind of leverage more technology, but if you have technology today, I would strongly encourage you to optimize what you have. So
Mhm.
I really believe in leveraging your vendor partnership
Yes.
and
Oh, yes.
understanding how are they thinking, what are they bringing, and there's no need to go build something when it's going to be delivered, and maybe you have to wait a little bit longer, but it will be coming. Um, so avoid the rework, optimize, and leverage your great vendor partners because they're all working on, really strong roadmaps probably
Yeah.
and listening to all these things like you and I are talking about with
Yeah.
AI and generative AI and,
Yeah.
how do we bake that in? So I think really, understanding what your vendors can do, and then that's the external part is,
Mhm, mhm, mhm.
connecting in with them, but internally, you really have to decide on the primary purpose and use of different technologies, because what we've seen over time is they have started overlapping with capability. And, "Oh, we can do that. Oh, yeah, we can do that too." So you
Mm,
have multiple ways to solve something or to
mm.
bring it into the employee experience, but you have to keep that kind of overarching layer of how does this feel to the employee and then on the back end, what is it like to maintain this and, what's the best way to do
Yes.
this? If you've set out as a best practice, this technology is its primary use is this.
Yeah.
If they add a capability that is not in line, that's your opportunity to come together and talk about it,
Yep.
and not just, "Oh, it's a new thing. Let's
Let's
turn it
take
on. Let's
it.
start
Yeah.
using it." And you don't consider the fact that, "Oh, but that's
Yeah.
competing with something else, and now it's
Yeah.
confusing."
Yeah. Oh, that's so great, and there's so much in there, Nicole. I mean, there was one question in my head, but I think you answered it already, right? One of the questions that I always ask, like, so there are two religions that you can go. One is best of breed, and the other one is more integrated. And I think what I heard you say is like, first think about the more integrated way so that you really sweat what you have versus getting a special system for this, for that, for this, and then try to somehow make sense of this complexity. Because what does this complexity also means is your team doesn't have any time for innovation. They just have to make sure that this complexity continues to work today, tomorrow, and the day after, right?
Right. Yes, you
And
don't wanna create such an ecosystem that, you know, one piece, it's too fragile, like, one piece,
Mm.
causes the other pieces to crumble or become problematic. So, yeah, you do want the seamless, um, integration where you can have it.
Yeah. Nah, this is I think really really helpful. And connected to this a bit. The experience space is still very new, and you can actually achieve a lot in this wide open field. When you think about, your recent experiences, what interesting projects did you run to improve the experience, and what were the driving factors behind these projects?
Well, I have some that might not sound exciting, but in the HR space, it was exciting. Um, we worked on kind of the 2 ends of the process, 2 ends of the life cycle, I guess I would say.
Oh, onboarding and offboarding.
No, I would want to work on that and have, uh, like, a great story to tell you about that, and I know some companies are really doing that. But we were more in the, like, the requisitioning process that managers
Ah,
have to
yeah.
go through,
Ye
and then, the termination process on the other end. And
Yeah.
and so, again, it's not something that an employee or a manager is doing every day. So you wanna make
Mhm.
it very simple when they do need to go use it. And so we did do some interesting work on the requisition and position creation, and it's it's a very HR kind of space where
It is,
HR
yes.
understands the system and why
Yeah,
you have to have
yeah,
this before you could go do that.
yeah, yeah,
So we were able to really mask some of the complexity and without getting into the details of, what we did and spending a lot of time on that, um, the result and the outcome, was really positive because what we were able to do was tell a story that, hey, we brought together HR operations and talent acquisition and
yeah, yeah,
IT.
yeah,
And we all worked on this together to reduce the number of fields to be completed from 48 fields down to 14. And
Wow.
instead of 7 screens, it's on one screen and you
Ah,
complete one screen and submit.
amazing.
So the manager time saving, you know, was
Is tremendous.
it was significant and HR time saved as well.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
that was something we did. I won't go into the
And
termination the other end, but,
how did you do this, Nicole? Was it elimination of fields? Was it like, hey, we can utilize some logic and automation to complete those fields
yeah.
without the manager input? How did you go about that?
It was really looking behind the scenes and saying, "What's critical for a manager to complete?"
Yeah.
And we realized there were some fields that it's not critical for the manager to complete those. There
Mhm.
were others that we could bring logic in,
Mhm.
or streamline it by having a drop down selection of is it
Yeah.
this, or this,
Yeah.
and then
Yeah.
based on that,
Yeah.
then there would be logic that,
Yes.
you know so instead
Brilliant.
of having, like, wide open, "Hey, they can select, 100 options,"
Yes.
they don't need 100 options, right?
Yeah.
Based on the scenario, there may be just a few options they need to consider and maybe even, is it a backfill? Do you wanna copy this other one and just do the same thing, So,
Exactly.
there are
Yeah.
things that we built into the logic to just really, like, make it much more seamless. Now,
Brilliant.
again, when you design for hopefully 80%, if you're
Yeah.
lucky, 90%, of it, and then you still have those complicated scenarios, where it's a little more complex. But
Yeah.
yeah, we had
Brilliant.
some good success with that. The other one I'll mention that was more from a support, perspective was leveraging technology to, um, have more of a live agent chat support
Mhm.
channel for employees. And what I've seen is uh, it's much more common to see that in the IT side
Mhm.
with
Mhm.
IT
Mhm.
support that you could chat with someone to solve your problem, but maybe not
Mhm.
so much HR. And
Mhm.
so we did launch something like that. And the interesting thing was that we already had a chatbot. So we had to
Yeah.
really think through what's more visible and do you go through the chatbot to get to
To
a
human.
live
Yeah.
with a live person,
Yeah. Yeah.
and how do you sequentially do that? So,
Yeah.
I'll say that was something that we launched more quietly, not with a
Mhm.
big, campaign,
Mhm.
and wanted
Mhm.
to soft launch it really so that we could build experience and trust with that product and
Yeah.
refine it, as we went.
Yeah.
But, that was another one that I think, was a win for HR. Um, you can't have IT teams supporting HR. So, you kind of have that parallel process, but
Yes.
really it makes sense to employees then when you have the parallel processes that, oh, this
Yeah.
looks like it's similar to this. So it's just, it's another way to get support.
Fantastic. And Nicole, what I really love on that is your launch approach, this stealth launch approach. I think with that you can learn so much because who you usually get are users that are, more looking around the system, trying a few things. They are more experimental, but also way more likely to share their feedback, right? Versus when you do a full-on launch to get you get everyone and you get therefore also all the folks that's like, something has changed. Why do I have to do this now? And then you have to figure out what is valuable feedback, what is just noise, right? So this approach of a stealth launch is something I haven't seen very often, but what you describe is really one of the great use cases for it, right?
Right. Yeah. It worked well.
That's fantastic. Now, experience, you also have to somehow measure it, right? So what is your KPI set? How do you go about understanding if you do a good job or if you need to do a better job? What are the KPIs that you're using?
Well, that's an interesting question because, I've had multiple conversations with other companies about this as well.
Yeah,
And so it's a vast area, right? We're talking about employee experience, so it's vast. So, typically there's a dashboard and you can have some like really high level measures that are happening. Engagement is very common,
yeah,
right? Employee net promoter score,
yeah,
satisfaction, turnover,
yeah.
retention, mobility, well-being, productivity. Those are really big ones. Um,
Mhm,
but I like to think of it in almost layers of
mhm.
measures as well. Those are those really high level measures.
Yeah,
And then you've got some maybe other layers to that. So we've talked about support.
yeah.
So if you focus on, the support teams and what are the support teams doing, there's a whole set of measures around that to say, hey, are we providing the right level of support? What is the volume? What is the
Mhm,
timeliness of our responses and the
mhm,
accuracy and customer satisfaction for that piece and,
mhm, mhm.
those kind of things. And then you have and you're measuring some of that, right? Customer satisfaction. You're sending a survey, their
Yeah, yeah,
response, that active level of data coming in. And then you've got the more passive data that tells a story.
yeah,
And you're looking for those behaviors like maybe on, a portal page or website, the clicks. What are they
yeah,
clicking on?
yeah.
What are what are the related draw the connection between your support, call volumes or ticket
Mhm,
volumes related to what you're seeing in their behaviors and clicking and, are they completing the process or is it going
mhm.
incomplete? You can tell from the system, right? They don't have
Yeah,
to
yeah,
or conversely, do you have high volume
yeah,
on a process? And what is that telling you? So
yeah.
I think there's just so much data that's again something that can be overwhelming. So, start with what you can collect
Yeah.
and the data that you can pull together and a lot of times it's across systems. You have more than one system, you have more than one data set. And so having some of those really smart, analytics people that can come alongside you and help draw those connections so that you can
Mhm,
bring some insight out of
mhm,
that
mhm.
is really important.
Yeah, and then make sense of this and utilize it to improve it on a daily basis. Great.
Exactly.
Nicole, that was a lot about it today. I would love to take you also to tomorrow. Before, the today can be action, you need to have a clear plan, a vision in mind of where you want to go to, how your ideal picture of an HR function or the experience in the future looks like. Where do you see experience in 3 to 5 years?
Well, that's a good question. I don't have a crystal ball, but I will give you some of my thoughts. I think
That
the
sounds like a
most
deal.
Yeah, okay. So, I see the most successful HR teams being the ones that embrace change, embrace technology, and they're very good at prioritizing and collaborating with the other functions. And
Hmm.
and so companies that are successful, let's take it broader, not just HR, the company will be successful if they embrace change, embrace technology, and they're good at prioritizing and collaborating. So those are just some of the things that need to be true to be successful. But I also think, we have to get good at saying no or saying not now. So that's that prioritization piece. HR should be advising, on talent and people
Yeah.
strategy.
And
Um, but HR can't be the people pleasers. So they have to be able to say no, right?
that's
Um,
difficult for them, especially
it is
for HR
hard,
people. It's difficult to
really
say no.
hard because at the core, um, we want
They want
employees
to
to be
help.
happy, and
Mm.
we want everyone to be happy, but we do have to really focus in on those things that are going to have the impact.
Yeah. Uh,
Um, and then I think HR and managers need to be continue to be enabled through technology, not only to find, for example, external talent, but also leveraging their internal talent to
yeah.
get the best outcomes. And so HR is going to have to come alongside and be skilled at advising leaders, on what's the right strategy here. So, um, as an employee, I care about my own development. I care about my own career and I can take control of it to the best of my ability. But if we
Mhm.
don't have the processes and the technology there to help with it,
Supported. Mm.
how do we keep moving forward? And,
Yeah.
how do we have a sustainable way as a business, to continue with that? So, I don't see necessarily employee experience being its own standalone function
Mhm.
necessarily.
Mhm.
I get,
But
ideally
very much
being
integrated.
yes, yes. And so ideally it's just embedded
Yeah.
and um hopefully a business imperative, right? We have standards that are
Mm.
reinforced and embedded across projects and processes and technology. And we have people who are good stewards of that,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
watching over that, uh, and leaders that will continue to invest in that. Um, I think there's just
Keep it up in
um,
everything you do.
yeah, yeah, exactly.
Mm. Brilliant. Ah, wise words. Nicole, we can't have a conversation about the future without talking about Gen AI. What is your view on Gen AI? Is it a hype? Is it a revolution? Is it something in between? Where are you today utilizing Gen AI? What have you seen or done already? And where do you think it will take us in the next few years to come?
It's really been fascinating to see Gen I, Gen AI, really take off and go
Yeah.
mainstream and become democratized, making it public, and people
Hmm.
who didn't even know what it was or had never heard of it, now know what it is, right? They've heard of it at least, right? Um, but it's been around for a while, and the savvy tech companies have been testing and evolving this, over a
Yeah.
period of several years.
Yeah.
And I think what has happened is that development has been expedited by
Hmm.
the
Hmm.
sudden demand. And if they were working on it, they've expedited, or if they weren't working on it, they quickly got it into
Quickly
the
got
roadmap.
into. Mhm.
So, I just recently saw Gartner had been putting out a lot about AI, and they said that Gen AI had passed the peak of inflated expectation
Oh,
is
wow.
how they stated it. So they have a recent article on the
Yeah.
AI hype cycle,
Yeah.
and it's just really interesting. But
Yeah.
I think we have to remind ourselves that Gen AI is just one part of AI, the bigger AI. Um, and I do think it's good for employee experience. It's good for business, and it has to have proper governance and a security in place. And again, if your vendors are bringing that in and they're doing the work, and of course, maybe there's an upcharge, but they're doing the work for you and bringing it into integrating it in. Um, then you have to hold them accountable for the governance and security
Mm.
aspects, the privacy aspect, and those kind of things. But I think, and I've seen that it really can enhance,
Yeah.
example, chatbots.
Yes. Yeah.
Some of the earlier chatbots that didn't have that, and now you see the ones that do. I mean, there is
Yes.
a difference, right? There's
Uh,
a
It's
significant
day and
difference.
night. It's day and
Yeah,
night.
exactly.
Yeah.
So I really think it can be helpful for companies. It can be helpful for HR with all
Yeah.
the, policies and information that people don't want. Let's be honest, they don't want to read it.
No, they
Um,
don't.
so can you feed it to me, what
Mm.
I'm looking for, and in the way, that
Yeah,
is
conversational
personalized
way.
to me.
Mm.
But there's a lot of other use cases like drafting content
Yeah.
creation. Um, it's helpful for language
Oh,
translation.
yes. Yeah.
Um, I'm not a code developer, but I've heard that it can do things like that.
Yeah. Yeah.
Even like for candidates looking for a job, they can
Yeah.
quickly research a company before applying for the job and get, a quick
Yeah.
summary
Exactly.
and those kinds of things. So I see it being very helpful.
Yeah.
Um, and I just think we have to put it in context of AI in general and
Yeah.
have the proper application for the
Yeah.
use case. So, AI is a huge category.
Yeah.
I think it's going to be around and it's going to be very helpful for us for a long time to come. But we need people who can help us understand the right type of AI to apply so that we're not, wasting our time expecting
Yeah.
something from Gemini that it's not intended to help with,
Yeah.
or
Yeah.
it's not the best application, right?
I couldn't agree more, Nicole. I think of it, it's like a Swiss Army knife. You have multiple different tools in the AI tool set, and some of them work for a specific use case. Like, you have a screwdriver on your Army knife. It helps you when you have a screw that you need to get in or out, right? But it won't help you if you have a nail. So always come from the use case, not from the tool. And when you come from the use case, it might be something that is applicable, that will help you and make it better than it was yesterday, right? The chatbot is a very good example, a very big example. Everyone hated chatbots pre Gen AI because they were really dumb and useless. They could not really understand what you wanted from them. They always gave standard answers. They were frustrating. It was one of the more hated tools that we brought to the market, and now everyone wants to engage with them. It's like, oh, can I have a chatbot? Can I have a Gemini? I want to just type to it and want to get something out of it. So it really changed because the capability has changed, and therefore the use case applicability is so much better than this. Yeah,
Right. And even just
brilliant,
the maintenance of something like that, right? The maintenance has become so different.
streamlined.
Um,
Yes, yes. How much you needed to work on a bit of smartness on a chatbot before was so much manual work, and now you push the engine in, you train it, but the training to a big extent also is automatic, right? You feed the information in, and it will digest it. It's very different. I couldn't agree more. Oh, but Nicole, I've always already talked so much, and we've taken so much time together. It was a very, very interesting conversation, but I also have to be conscious of the time that you gave me. So if you don't mind, one last question. After looking to the future, let's come back into the today. When you think about employee experience today, what do you think are the top challenges and how would you approach them?
Top 3 challenges. Well, I'm gonna sound like I'm broken record a little bit and repeat myself, but creating that cohesive experience across systems
Yeah.
and processes, I think I don't know if you can ever achieve that really. There's just your work is never done, and that's what's
No.
fascinating about it. Everything
Mm,
keeps changing, and we keep going after, that better experience,
agree.
and there are just so many potential solutions and so much happening at any point in time that, it takes proactive planning,
Mm,
collaboration, and really just tenacity to stay aligned, and get there, keep working at it. So that's one, and then the second one, I would say really embedding employee experience as a stage gate
mhm.
on anything employee facing. It could be
Yeah.
communications, it could be initiatives, it could be systems and processes, but really establishing kind of we can't go past this until we've
Mhm.
said, yeah, we've met the requirement. So you have to have some type of governance, and it's a consideration every time.
Yeah.
And back to what we said earlier in the conversation, it might involve, leveraging employees in
Yeah.
your design and your testing and your feedback. So, just having a way of really embedding that. And then the last one, really balancing standardization with personalization.
Mm,
I don't really think there's an exact science to this, but certainly standardizing where it makes sense to
mm.
enable the consistent approach. And, it's easier to maintain for sure, if you can do that, but also leveraging the data and the technology because technology is constantly evolving
Yeah.
so that you can leverage that to
Be more
personalize it
personal. Mm,
exactly as much as possible.
brilliant. Great words. I think, Nicole, this is a great point to end our conversation. Thank you so much. So many interesting insights you shared. It was really I really enjoyed our conversation. Thank you so much for that.
My pleasure.
Have a wonderful rest of the day.